Hi, everybody. I wanted to go through the presentation of the student article presentations that we have outlined and set up for this the week starting on the 5th of February. So I'm going to be making some modifications in the syllabus to reflect some changes that we went through on Thursday. The key part of it I sent out as an announcement already, which is that we're going to start our student article presentations on the 5th. So that'll kind of pick up from there. But what I wanted to do right now was to just go through this student presentation and what that really means. I wanted to loosen up the restrictions that I had on this. So I basically have said that the presentation is between 6 to 10 PowerPoint slides. So you have your title slide here, 4 informational slides, a conclusion slide, and then a wildcard slide is the 6 that you can aim for here, or the 6 to 8 that you can aim for here. But you may decide to add in a slide or two just to help emphasize a point. And I'm going to show that in one example so that you can sort of see how an article can be translated into a particular type of PowerPoint presentation. So let's take an article that came from a class in which they were looking at Alzheimer's disease. And so in this case, what we're looking at is this was something that was done for a different class, so I had a team of 2 people on this. And what they were interested in was understanding and looking at the effects of Alzheimer's disease, or rather, what effects are happening with synapses and transmission within glia in Alzheimer's disease. And so the abstracts here, and the thing I wanted to kind of get across to you guys was that there's a lot of data that's being presented in this paper. So this is figure 1, and figure 2, and that's got some pictures, figure 3, figure 4, et cetera, et cetera. There's no way that you could, in those 6 to 10 slides that you have, go through each of those different points. You have to pick out the ones that bring out the biggest part of the story that you're interested in. So you choose some of the figures that you're going to end up wanting to do. So let's see what these guys did and how they kind of walked through this particular type of article. So here, what we have is, no, this is not it. Sorry. Here. Here it is where we have it, and there's so it's two folks who are presenting altered synapses and glial transmission. Title is the same as what they showed in the article, and then what we're seeing is just a little background on Alzheimer's disease. So they did a little outside research and captured a couple of key markers or key aspects of it and some images to try to help back it up. And then what they did is they basically were trying to help frame what the question was and the big picture in the article, which is what causes this cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease. And so they thought, as the introduction of the article goes through to describe it, says like, well, maybe this primarily mediated by a functional disruption than rather cell degradation. So maybe there's different neurotransmitter systems that are messed up or get disrupted. And so they go through and they talk about this thing where different types of neurons start to get affected. And so they were trying to link that and then also this loss of synapses that can happen that might be related to cognitive decline rather than the actual than these formation of these different types of plaques, which they described over here. So they go through and they get into their main question. And so I liked this because it was just so clean and clear. So this is one example where you can kind of use that to help emphasize a point. And then what they're doing is they go into and they describe a little bit of detail of what some markers were that were in the paper and the figures that you're going to be seeing. So there's different transporters and these different markers. And so this is the point which you're going to spend a little bit of time on in your description. And you're going to want to try to link it up as you can to the next slide, which is basically going through and saying that and trying to describe all of these figures. Wow, that's a lot of figures to talk about, and you don't have to talk about every single one of them. The main point that they wanted to basically say was that if they were looking at regions that were plaque-free, areas that were sort of in the periphery of the plaque, and then areas that were right next to the plaque, that they see a drop in this particular marker here, and here, and here. And so they're basically trying to, so their overall trend is relatively easy to try to characterize. And so, and then they were looking under these different types of conditions. So whether they had this in the Alzheimer's condition here, if they were looking at a transgenic mouse model as well. So then they move on to, and they have another slide here. And the thing that was the point of this was actually to say was, okay, they've lost a lot of these different terminals of that are related to glutamate and to GABA. This is a GABA marker here. So these two different types of neurons have been lost. And then what they want to basically get into is to say, well, but it looks like the function of GABAergic neurons are actually still maintained. And so in a mouse model, they were able to show that this activity of this particular enzyme is upregulated in the Alzheimer's model of in the mouse. So versus here. So they direct our attention to one particular point out of this whole figure to help us bring that particular point home. So here, the GAD enzymatic activity significantly increases in the cortex of the 12-month transgenic mouse. So the point that they're trying to get at then is they're saying, okay, you might lose synaptic terminals and the neurons might lose their endings that are for glutamate or for GABA, but the brains themselves are producing more GABA to make up for that loss. And that's what they're seeing in this type of context. They think that might be why they're able to have some compensatory activity of the GABAergic system in patients with Alzheimer's disease relative to those that don't. So they go through and they kind of go through this type of conclusion here. They summarize those conclusions and then have a big takeaway. Again, another slide that you could add, which is why I gave you guys the wiggle room of adding, going up to 10 slides to make it really clear about what this point is. And some of this refers to figures that were outside of what you would have time to present, but it's a part of the story that can help illustrate. And then the issues. What is it that the issues are in that particular type of paper? So I hope that gives you an idea of how to sort of break down and get into some of these different types of presentations and critically think about them. You'll use that science journaling type of approach to be able to analyze the paper. But then for your presentation, you're going to be using this type of presentation approach to be able to communicate the main points of the paper and then also any critiques that you might have. All right, thank you.